Conor McGregor has shocked everyone after going through an absolutely unreal physical transformation. The Irishman is rocking the physique of a bodybuilder as he continues to hint at a comeback to the UFC. He's gotten so buff that fans are saying that he has Joe Rogan neck. And speaking of Joe Rogan, did you know that he had a really interesting run-in with Mark Coleman? Keep watching for more on both stories. First up, a jacked up Conor McGregor. The last time we saw Conor inside the cage was back at UFC 264 when he was facing Dustin Poirier in their sellout trilogy battle. The Irishman suffered a first-round technical knockout after a nasty leg snap, causing him to go on a long break away from the game. But instead of just partying, McGregor has been working super hard on his body to make sure he's in shape in case he ever decides to make a comeback to the UFC. He's been uploading pictures and videos of his progress, and we'd be lying if we said we aren't blown away. Mystic Mac looks nothing like an MMA fighter. It almost seems as if he's getting ready to compete in a bodybuilding competition or something. The former double champion recently uploaded another picture on his social media looking like an absolute monster. He's so jacked that fans have actually started comparing his neck to Joe Rogan's. One user even commented on how McGregor literally has the Joe Rogan neck now. And in case you don't know what that means, we'd suggest you take a closer look at Joe's neck. Now, the UFC commentator is in exceptional shape himself, but his neck is just humongous. It's built like a log. And now that we look at Conor's, it's really hard not to see the similarity. Who knows, the Irishman and Joe Rogan might just be exchanging training tips. Moving on, is he doping though? Believe it or not, the Irishman has packed so much muscle that fans and fighters both have started accusing him of taking steroids. That's not good. USADA was the first one to come under fire though. Everyone started questioning their policies when they found out McGregor hasn't been tested even once in all of 2022. Justin Gaethje didn't hold back and openly accused the former doubleweight champion of taking steroids. Now, Justin did quickly clear things up by saying he didn't dope to get bigger, but he actually took it to make sure his legs heal quicker. MMA reporter Ariel Helwani also slammed USADA for testing fighters who haven't fought in ages when they're clearly giving Conor the free hand. Out of all people, we're not going to be the ones to make allegations that the Irishman is taking drugs. For starters, that's what doping agencies are for. If fans and fighters are skeptical, then USADA should step in and test him. And it's not like Conor isn't an active fighter or something either. He's an active fighter who's still on a UFC contract, which pretty much means he can be tested at any given time. But the fact that they haven't even made an effort to test him indicates he's no longer in the testing pool. And again, we don't want to make any assumptions, but that might just be the case since he's always had the good old Dana White privilege. Next, is he eyeing the light heavyweight division or something? With the way things are looking right now, we seriously can't tell what Conor is trying to do here. Even if he were able to get past the initial confusion of whether he's going to return or not, we'd be stuck guessing which division he's going to be fighting in. Every time he uploads a picture or video, he looks more buff than the last time, and that also means he probably weighs more too. When we first saw how much muscle he's put on, we started thinking he was planning to disrupt the welterweight division and possibly line himself up for a shot at the title after a few fights. But now it looks like he's even heavier than that, and the fact that he continues to pack on clean muscle is weird. Is he going to cut all that? If yes, then why pack it on in the first place? Why not just maintain weight and continue training? Users on Twitter and Instagram are literally at war trying to guess what the Irishman is trying to do. Some fans are coming up with absurd theories about how he's trying to move up not one, but two weight classes. Others think the weight gain is just for his role in the movie and that he'd eventually cut down to fight in the lightweight division. And then there's us. This isn't the first time we're saying this, but mark our words, there are just two possibilities. Either he's never going to return, or he'll come back for just one big money fight and then announce his retirement. We think his fighting days are over now. Following up, the wrong person to mess with. Mark Coleman is one of those guys you would never want to mess with, whether it's inside the cage or outside. Mark has always been a force of nature. Along with being the first heavyweight champion at the UFC, he's pretty much the pioneer of the ground and pound game. He'd throw guys twice his size to the octagon floor and continue to smack them over and over again until the ref eventually had to jump in and stop the fight. And if we're being honest, had he been active and in his prime today, the entire heavyweight division would have folded in front of the former champion. So out of all people, we're not sure why Joe Rogan chose to mess around with Coleman. We just don't get it. We'll tell you what Joe did in a bit, but first, let's talk about how their meeting went. Now, Joe and Coleman had met in the past once when when the UFC commentator interviewed the former fighter inside the octagon. And while that interview was pretty weird itself, the second time these guys met, Coleman pushed Joe into another dimension seconds after they embraced each other. Mark was at one of Rogan's comedy shows and decided to go backstage and meet him. As soon as they hugged, Joe literally went flying into the wall. We're glad he didn't get hurt, and Mark also cleared he wasn't drunk. So why did he push Joe into another dimension? Well, Mr. Rogan is a very slick man. Now, we don't know whether this really happened since Joe never confirmed, but apparently the commentator tugged Mark's hand as soon as he shook it, which prompted that push out of the former fighter. A really slick bugger indeed. Joe is always trying on something, and we don't mean drugs. He's always trying to mess with people, but not in a mean way. He's playing all sorts of psychological mind games, but it looks like it couldn't work on a guy that literally gave meaning to ground and pound. If this was Rogan's attempt at trying to intimidate the first heavyweight champion in the history of the UFC, then honestly speaking, he should have come up with something better. Believe it or not, Mark actually said that it was a gentle nudge and not really a push. He said if he actually pushed Joe, then it would have resulted in some serious damage for the former Fear Factor host. Also, despite what a lot of people think, both these guys are quite the buddies, and whenever they recall this incident, both of them just laugh it off. Last but not least, it doesn't even come close to last time. This might have sounded like a really intense incident or something, but stranger things have happened in the past. When Joe was first starting his career as a UFC commentator, he had to interview Mark Coleman after his fight. Now, Coleman was a pumped up man. He had just won. There were probably drinks going around, you know, everyone was having a good time. And when Joe brought the mic to his mouth, Mark dropped so many bombs we can't even tell you. The interview eventually had to be cut short because Coleman would refuse to talk without cursing. But when Joe took the mic away from him, Coleman literally picked him up and spun him around like a helicopter. So when you compare the shoving incident with this one, you can sort of tell both these guys have a history of messing around. And while Joe has never confirmed he tugged Mark's hand, he always talks about how powerful the former UFC champion is. Just a light nudge had him flying in the air, so we can't even imagine what would have happened if Coleman really did use all of his strength. It was probably a good lesson for Rogan though. Don't mess with the inaugural heavyweight champion. That's it from our side, folks. So what do you think? Does Conor really have a Joe Rogan neck? And is the Irishman on steroids? Let us know in the comments below. Remember, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more interesting videos in the future. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.